Okay, so we're going to look now at what we call removing brackets. So a lot of what we've looked at so far has been multiplying terms, adding like terms, and adding and subtracting like terms. What we're doing now is kind of a combination of all of those things. We're bringing everything that we've learned and we're trying to put it all together. To do that is kind of is in pursuit, if you like, is we're trying to remove the brackets. Okay, that's the goal, and we need to use all those tools in order to be able to do that. But to kind of explain the steps that we're doing, we're just going to talk through it using numbers, and then we'll maybe explicitly kind of lay out what our steps are. So this is kind of explaining it a little bit more, and then we'll kind of just lay out the steps so that we can follow them. So 4 multiplied by 30 is 120. 4 multiplied by 7 is 28. 4 multiplied by 37, I mean we can do by long division or we can use our calculator, whichever we choose, gives me 148. Now what we should notice there is that that answer is the same as me adding these previous two answers. And also 30 plus 7 gives me the 37 that I have there. So what we're suggesting here is that 4 multiplied by 37 is the same as doing 4 multiplied by 30 plus 4 multiplied by 7. Okay, and this is something that we have touched on before, and it's the idea of multiplication being what we call distributive. So instead of doing multiplication on a big number, like I suppose 37 isn't all that big, but just one that we wouldn't know straight off, we can actually split that up into two numbers that we do know a bit easier, and we can multiply both of those and add it together. We can see the same thing with 5 multiplied by 42. We could maybe rewrite that as 5 multiplied by 40 plus 2, which is 5 multiplied by 40 plus 5 multiplied by 2. So we can see that the first step there maybe was to split it up within the bracket and to then split up the bracket itself. 5 multiplied by 40 gives me 200 and 5 multiplied by 2 gives me 10, so my answer is 210. And if we do 5 multiplied by 42, we get that same answer of 210. So we can see that this does work. This is a step, I suppose, that has been proven like a good few years ago. So it's something that we can apply to our algebra. We see it here, then we'll do one more example. 6 multiplied by 78 is 6 by 70 plus 6 by 8. 6 by 70 then is going to be 420. And then 6 by 8 gives me 48, so my answer is 468, which is the same answer we get by just doing 6 multiplied by 78 directly. Okay, so in one way, this is one way of making multiplication just generally easier. So if you're multiplying a big number, that you'd be able to just do that fairly quickly in your head. But we can also apply this to algebra. So if we have a look, let me see how to rub that out. If we have a look at this question here, we have 3 multiplied by x plus 5, and we need to compare this to one of the previous ones that we have here. So let's compare it with this sum here, 5 multiplied by 40 plus 2. The first step that we did was, instead of saying 5 multiplied by 40 plus 2, okay, which was how we kind of broke up the 42, what we've got to is we've said that that's the same as 5 multiplied by 40 plus 5 multiplied by 2. So we can do the same thing here. Instead of 3 multiplied by x plus 5, we can rewrite that as 3 multiplied by x plus 3 multiplied by 5. Now where are all of those numbers coming from? Well, the 3 obviously is the number in front, and because we're trying to, as we said, distribute that multiplication across, what we're trying to get at is that we do 3 multiplied by x, and then we do 3 multiplied by 5. And that's what we're really just writing out here. Remember, brackets mean multiply, so what I have written here is just 3 multiplied by x and 3 multiplied by 5. Okay, so we're saying that 3 multiplied by x plus 5 is the same as just multiplying each of those individual parts by 3. Okay, and it's called, we kind of think of it nearly as multiplying across by 3. So we're multiplying each of those parts by 3 individually. The reason it's a plus 3 is because the number that we have in front here is a plus 3. Okay, remember, if there's no sign in front of it, we just kind of assume that that's a plus. So that's where the plus comes from here then. But let's see how that works, or we can push this a little bit further. We remember 3 multiplied by x is what? It is 3x, and 3 multiplied by 5 is just 15. So we get 3x plus 15, and what we notice is no brackets. And what were we aiming to do at the start? We were trying to remove the brackets. So we've gotten rid of them. By doing this, by this multiplying across, we've gotten rid of the brackets altogether. So this is a really, really key step, and it's something to be really, really clear on and to make sure that you're able to kind of replicate for yourself. I suppose this note here just goes through it in a bit more detail and shows us just again the same kind of steps that we've been doing here. And this is something that we kind of have in your OneNote as well. If we follow the examples then, so let's try some of these examples here. So we have 3 multiplied by x plus 5. So that's the same one that we actually just looked at. So let's maybe just go on to the second example. So 4 multiplied by 2y plus 3. So the first step that we did, we said that what we want is 4 multiplied by 2y. So we write down 4 multiplied by 2y plus 4 multiplied by 3. Okay, so we're taking each of those two things in the bracket and we're writing them out separately. Okay, we're kind of writing out those two sums that we're doing. And then we get a solution of 8y plus 12. And that's just us multiplying those out. And that's going back to what we did in one of those previous videos about multiplying terms. If we look at the next part, the same idea is applying here. So I have the 5 that's in front multiplied by z. Okay, and that's coming from here. So the z is here. And then again, I have the 5 that's in front, and it's going to be multiplied by the next term, which is not just 4, it's actually minus 4. And it's really important that because it's minus 4, that we include that minus, because that's going to change our answer. Remember with those arrows there, we were kind of talking about the sums that we're doing. So it's 5 multiplied by z, and it's 5 multiplied by minus 4. So we have to indicate that. And you can see where the minus went. The minus is staying with the 4 because it's a minus 4. So we don't accidentally maybe put the minus in the middle here instead of the plus. The minus stays with the 4. So I get 5z and plus 5 multiplied by minus 4. So plus by a minus gives me an answer that's a minus 20. We look at the next part, then we're going to do it exactly the same way. Okay, it looks slightly different because this time now we have this minus in front, but we're just going to follow it the same way. So we start with the number that's in front, the minus 2, and we're going to multiply it by the first term that I have, which is the x. Then my next thing is I put the number that's in front, which is minus 2, and I'm going to multiply that by 3. Minus 2 multiplied by x is minus 2x, and minus 2 multiplied by 3 is minus 6. Okay. Each time here I'm following exactly the same steps. So what's really, really important is that you're able to follow this key step here the whole way along. And we can nearly consider that kind of splitting. So that's really your multiplication. Okay, that is my multiplication. Okay, that is my multiplication step. And you need to be able to follow that step really, really fluently, that you can move from that first line to the second line. And you should write out all your steps like this. So following the steps and following them down the way. That's what you need to do in your copy to just really ingrain this into your head then. So looking a little bit further then, okay, we're trying to push this on ever so slightly as well. And if you need to at any point, you can stop the video, you can go do some of the questions and you can come back. You don't have to follow the video through the whole way. But if we're looking at a question like this, okay, minus and then 2 plus 3. So think of our order of operations, okay, our bird mass that we did. The very first thing we do is brackets. If there's a sum in the brackets, we do that first. So that's going to give me minus 5. And we should hopefully remember from when we did this, when we did our integers, that if we have a minus in front of a bracket with no number written there, we can nearly imagine that there's a 1 there. Okay, we're sensing a theme here. If there's a number, if there's a place where there should be a number and there doesn't seem to be one, it's probably a 1. So what we really have then, if we split it up, is we have minus 1 multiplied by 5, which is minus 5. Okay? But what this means is it just kind of helps us to kind of sort out some of these equations a little better. So let's look at the next one, minus and then bracket x plus 4. So let's apply the same idea. If we have a minus there in front of it, that's like a minus 1. So what I get is minus 1 multiplied by x minus 1 multiplied by 4. So actually the same as the last example, but instead of the minus 2 that we had, it's just a minus 1. And that gives me minus x minus 4. And what we should see has happened here is really, for both of the two terms that we had, the x and the 4, all that's happened is we've changed the sign to a minus, because we're multiplying each of them by minus 1. And they're already a plus to begin with. So we've changed the sign. The same thing happens here. So minus by 2x, we remember that that's like having a minus 1 in front of it. So it's minus 1 by 2x minus 1 by minus 3. Okay, and just making sure we know where everything's coming from there. Let me just highlight them again. The minus staying with the minus 3, and then the minus 1 in front staying the same as well. And you notice here, if you compare it back to some of the previous ones, I'm still following the steps exactly the same the whole way down. I haven't changed a single thing in the way that I'm doing these questions. Every single one has been the exact same. And that's really important that you stay with that as well. So for the last one, we might want to skip forward. It's actually the same as the first one. So we should know that it changes the sign of both of the terms. So my answer is minus x minus 4. Okay. So what we're coming to now is some other types of these questions, okay? Putting a lot of what we've been doing together. So we've seen multiplying terms, we've seen now this idea of removing brackets, and what we're going to see now is equations that have two brackets, okay? So adding two different types of brackets together. And if we're solving an equation with two brackets, we multiply to remove the brackets, and then we add the like terms. So removing the brackets was what we just did, and then we add the like terms. So looking at the first example here, in the top left, we can see there's really two sums that we're trying to do. The first one is in the yellow here. The second one then is going to be the green. So let's start with the yellow one. Start with the yellow one first. We should remember that to split up to get rid of the brackets for 2 multiplied by x plus 3, we can say that that's the same as 2 multiplied by x plus 2 multiplied by 3. That first step that we've been keeping the same the whole way down, so make sure we're able to follow that. And if we continue on, 2 multiplied by x is 2x, and 2 multiplied by 3 is 6. Okay, I'm working down here and keeping it really, really clear for myself. We focus on the green part then. That's like having 3 multiplied by x plus 3 multiplied by 4. Okay, and keeping that green here. And 3 multiplied by x is 3x, and 3 multiplied by 4 is 12. So we've ended up now at a point where we have just an expression with no brackets. So let's just again make a little note here. This part is our removing the brackets. Okay, just the part that we've just done or just looked at. So from here to here is our removing brackets. For the next little bit, we have to think back to our adding like terms. So we look and see how many x's do I have. I have 2 here plus 3, so I have 5 x's altogether. I have 2 and I get 3 more x's. I have 5 x's. Remember, the number in front tells us how many x's are there. Same thing with the numbers then. If I have 6 plus 12, I have plus 18. And that would be my final answer. So we can see now that what we've done is we've gotten rid of the brackets and we've done what we call simplifying. Okay, so this part here is what we would call simplifying. So we're making it simpler by adding our like terms. And the equation that we've ended up with, 5x plus 18, is a lot simpler than the one we started with. Okay, and that's the idea. We try the next part. So same idea again. Let's keep this in yellow. Let's keep this one in green. Okay, and you might want to do something similar. Maybe if it's not highlighting, you might just draw underneath it with a different color for each of the kind of two brackets that you're looking at. So 4 multiplied by 2y gives me, we write out our 4 multiplied by 2y plus 4 multiplied by 6, and that gives me 8y plus 24. And then for the other bracket, 3 multiplied by y plus 3 multiplied by 2, and that gives me plus 3y plus 6. How many y's do I have altogether? Well, 8 here and 3 here, so 11 altogether. And 24 plus 6 gives me plus 30. Okay, and that's my answer again. So again, just keeping it all nice and neat and following down as we work through it, doing our steps in a descending way. It keeps it really straightforward. So when we multiply out a bracket, we do it underneath so that we can see at each point what are we changing. And just doing one step from each line. We look at the next one just because slightly different because we're bringing in some minuses. So to split up our first bracket, our yellow one here, 3 multiplied by x minus 2. Remember, same idea. We're kind of multiplying across by that 3. It becomes 3 multiplied by x plus 3 multiplied by minus 2. That's the same as all the questions we've done in the first part here. We should be making sure that we should be fairly happy with those ones now. 3x minus 6. Look how much practice we're getting of it. Now the next part, we just need to be careful about the minus 2. So we make sure, like the sums we looked at there, we have minus 2 multiplied by 3x minus 2 multiplied by 7. So again, this number in front here is always exactly the same as this one here, and that includes the sign, because the sign is important. It is minus 2, it's not just plus 2, it's not just a 2. Minus 2 multiplied by 3x gives me minus 6x, and minus 2 multiplied by 7 gives me minus 14. Then looking at our x's, I have 3x here and I have minus 6x here, and that actually gives me minus 3x. And then minus 6 minus 14 gives me minus 20. Okay, looking at one last example that's kind of similar. That. We keep going. So 7 multiplied by 4x plus 7 multiplied by minus 3. Okay, and I get 28x minus 21. And if I do this part, minus 4 by x minus 4 by minus 3. Okay, being careful with that part here with the two minuses. So making sure we know the minus 3 here and then the minus 4 here. Keeping the signs with the number they're associated with. Minus 4x plus 12, which gives me 24x minus 9. Okay, so that last one did fairly quickly, so make sure you're able to follow those ones, and it's just continuing on in exactly the same way each time. For the next parts, we just have one small little bit to be careful of. Okay, and we should see that what's in front of the bracket this time has a letter as well, has a variable, but we've looked at questions like this before. Okay, and if you're not sure, maybe go back and look at that video or look over those notes again. So let's have a look. We'll break it down. 2x multiplied by x plus 4. So we're following the same steps. So my first thing is I split up that multiplication. Instead of doing it just across the whole bracket, I kind of divide it up. So 2x multiplied by x plus 2x multiplied by 4. How do I multiply x by x? Well, we remember that we thought about there being a small little one there, and we add those two numbers, and 2x squared. We should kind of just remember for x's that x multiplied by x is x squared. Then 2x multiplied by 4 gives me 8x altogether. Then looking at the green part here, splitting that up, we get 5x multiplied by 2x plus 5x multiplied by minus 1. Okay, and doing that out, then we get 10x squared minus 5x. So at this point, multiplying out something like this here should be fairly straightforward for you. Okay, so make sure you're practicing questions like that and multiplying those out, and that you're really happy that x multiplied by x gives me x squared, and that you can see why 5x multiplied by 2x gives me 10x squared. If we look now at my different terms, we're coming into something that's really important and that we mightn't just have clarified enough. But x squared is not the same as x. They're not the same. So they are not like terms because they're not the same letter. In the simplest case, they're just not the same. They're not exactly the same. There's something different. So if they're not exactly the same, they're different terms. So we just look at the x squareds. How many x squareds do I have altogether? Well, I have 2, and then I have 10. So altogether, I have 12 x squareds. How many x's? Well, I have plus 3x. Okay, and that's the end of that sum, then we can't go any further. If we look at the one on the right here, that's a little bit longer looking. What we can see is we have one bracket, we have a second bracket, and then at the very end, we have a part here that's not a bracket. It's just a part to add on at the end. So we'll worry about that when we come to it. Let's focus on the bracket first. So splitting it out so that we can do our first sums, so that we can see what they are. And this again, just coming back, we've been following the same step now for the last 10 minutes. Then doing the next part, 3x multiplied by 4x and 3x multiplied by minus 3y. Remember again, we're keeping the minus with the 3y because that's where it is in the question. The minus is with the 3y in the question, so we keep it there. And then at the very end, we still have our plus 2xy. And you can see the way I'm using the colours here. That's something you can get used to as well. Yeah, so you can get used to just drawing it underneath. If you use just a coloured pen underneath, then that will keep it just straightforward for you. X multiplied by x is x squared. Again, we should know that. X multiplied by y, all we can do is write it as xy. We can't make that any simpler, so we just get rid of the multiplication sign. 3x multiplied by 4x gives me 12x squared. 3x multiplied by minus 3y, if I multiply the numbers, I get minus 9, and x multiplied by y is just xy. At the end, I have plus 2xy. Okay, we've removed our brackets. Perfect, lovely. That's our first step, remove the brackets. Now we have to look at the terms. So here I have an x squared, here I have another x squared. So how many x squareds altogether? Well, 1x squared plus 12x squared gives me 13x squared. Here I have an xy, then I have minus 9xy, and I have plus 2xy. So how many does that give me in total? Well, if we take it maybe over the side here, my sum is 1 minus 9 plus 2, which actually gives me an answer of minus 6. So here I have minus 6xy. Okay, minus 6xy. Let's just make that green so it fits in. Minus 6xy. And that's the end of my question. Again, I can't go any further. I can't add x squared and xy because they're not exactly the same. And if they're not exactly the same, then they're not like terms. Okay, if the letters aren't exactly the same, then I can't add them together. And remembering again that the number in front of each of the letters just tells us how many of them we have. So we have 13x squareds and we have 6xy's. So some of these sums can look confusing, particularly these ones here that have x's in front of the term as well. So what you just need to be careful of is making sure that you're keeping really clear on what sum you're doing at all times. Okay, so keeping it really clear. So the way I've been using the colours there should hopefully make it clear when you're following the videos, when you're following the examples here, that you can see where each kind of part of the sum is coming from. But that's something you can actually do for yourself as well. You can use that in your questions. But you can see that for these questions, we need to be really clear on how to multiply terms, on how to add like terms, and how to follow through on all these points. Really important that you're clear on all of those. So do a few of the questions, follow the examples, and follow these steps. Follow these steps exactly. So that first step of splitting up that middle bracket and rewriting out this middle line here. So this middle line that we've had in each of the questions, we had it here as well. So that middle line that we had, the very first one where we take the bracket and we kind of split it up into two, and then we're just following through. We're multiplying the terms, we're adding and subtracting the like terms. If you keep it straightforward and stick with the same method every single time you do the questions, then you'll find it so much easier than to keep it just the same every time. You'll be able to just start any of the questions, no problem.